On December 18th, 2024, cinephiles were given an early Christmas gift when TCM aired the TV premiere of From Darkness to Light, a documentary about the unfinished and still to this day unreleased 1972 Jerry Lewis film, The Day the Clown Cried, about a clown imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp. The film has long been a source of mystery and speculation for film fans, with Lewis long insisting not enough material was filmed to ever assemble a finished version. But those eager to see what did exist were given hope when Lewis donated an incomplete copy to the Library of Congress in 2015, under the stipulation it would not be made available before June of 2024. Those who have seen all 5 hours of donated footage agree it represents only fragments of the overall narrative. From Darkness to Light was the public's first chance to finally see much of this footage for themselves, and, after decades of wondering, finally get a better sense of what Lewis was aiming for with the controversial project. While The Day the Clown Cried might be cinema's most infamous unfinished film, the very idea of unfinished or even finished but simply unreleased movies has, not surprisingly, long been an area of interest for hardcore film fans. Even with a seemingly unending plethora of released movies available, more than anyone could ever watch in a lifetime, fans, driven either by pure curiosity or perhaps simply the allure of getting what you can't have, often speculate on, search for, and call for the release of movies they feel are being kept from them. This concept of unreleased movies has become more common to the general audience in recent years, with eagerly anticipated finished or near-finished films like Batgirl, Scoob, Holiday Haunt, and Coyote vs. Acme all frustratingly permanently shelved by their studio, Warner Brothers, for tax purposes. But even before a social media campaign to save Coyote vs. Acme became big news, there has been a long history of certain films never quite getting to see the light of day. Notable examples include Cocksucker Blues, a 1972 documentary about the Rolling Stones that the band legally prevented from release after deciding they weren't happy with the depiction of their drug use and interactions with groupies. Hippie Hippie Shake, a 2007 film starring Cillian Murphy and Sienna Miller, about a 1970s Australian obscenity trial against the magazine Oz, which was shelved either due to creative disagreements between the filmmakers or criticisms from the real-life figures depicted, depending who you ask. 2011's Empire of the Deep, a $130 million budgeted Chinese fantasy about aquatic gods, giant crustaceans, and mermaids, which was billionaire John Jiang's attempt to replicate the success of James Cameron's Avatar, and went through 4 directors and years of reshoots before finally just being shelved after audiences largely laughed at the poor CGI shown in the film's trailer. And I Love You, Daddy, a 2017 comedy drama written, directed by, and starring Louis C.K., which saw its upcoming release scrapped after sexual misconduct allegations against the comedian were made public. Sometimes these stories have happy endings of a sort, at least for the audiences hoping to see them. Many commercially unreleased films nevertheless end up available in bootleg versions, such as the infamous Roger Corman-produced Fantastic Four adaptation. And sometimes, if audiences are simply patient enough, they might potentially finally be rewarded. All-Star Weekend, a sports comedy directed by Jamie Foxx that was shot back in 2016 and has remained unreleased ever since, apparently at least partly over concerns about Robert Downey Jr. playing a Mexican character, is allegedly now set for a 2025 release after Fox copied the Deadpool playbook and leaked a trailer himself in August of 2024. But sometimes, if you want to see a particular movie that has no apparent official release on the calendar, it might just be a matter of traveling to another country where the film has been released. That would be the case with Distant, a sci-fi comedy from DreamWorks, Amblin, and Universal that was shot in 2020 and remains without any hint of any marketing or a release date in North America, Europe, or most other markets today, but was oddly released only in Vietnam in July of 2024. That the movie is largely being ignored elsewhere is surprising, given that one of its leads starred in a significant box office hit, Smile 2, only months after its lackluster Vietnam premiere. At least the success of Smile 2, not to mention 2019's Aladdin, probably makes it easier for Naomi Scott to also know not only what it's like to have a completed movie sitting in limbo, but also to have a potential franchise starter fail to take off. The year is 2017, and Lionsgate Films are ready to reboot a popular, long-running children's TV property as a new theatrical blockbuster, and in the process hopefully launch the next big sci-fi superhero franchise with Power Rangers.
0.
Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris.
Nice. Yeah. Watch out, Bill Hader. Coming for his job.
100%.
Yeah. So this is the culmination of our annual extravaganza. Can we say that? Yeah, I think we can, right? It's
4 years in, I think we can.
Yeah, that's right. We've earned it. This is the second episode in Failure to Franchise presents Trev and Chris-tmas, our annual holiday bonanza. I'm just using all the big ones. Bonanza, extravaganza, smorgasbord.
I like that one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Feast for the ears and the senses.
Of course, a Christmas feast. A Christmas goose for everyone.
Wow.
This is when we gift each other movies from our way too long Failure to Franchise movie list.
And growing with all the news of the Sony universe. Oh my God.
I know. How many movies did we add this year alone? Jeez. You know what?
A lot.
We're never going to stop. We're never going to be done. We are locked and loaded for our entire lives.
Some may say it's a curse.
Including us, some may say. But we gift each other movies from that list that we worry we would otherwise maybe not get to, or just that we know we think the other person might like. Last time we did Monster Trucks, which you were kind enough to gift me because it was a movie that I had always been interested in checking out, and I think we both walked away from it, fairly positive. You more so than me, but it was a nice little It was a nice little pleasant surprise for a movie that has been just like shit on by the pop culture since it came out. To say like, no, it's not too bad. And this time, I gifted you. Well, I'll talk a little bit about why I gift you this movie. Sure. This is my gift to you. This is 2017, also, just like Monster Truck, 2017's Power Rangers. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. It is directed by Dean Israelite. This is his second feature after the YA film Project Almanac. I say that now thinking, is Project Almanac on our list?
I don't know, because, I don't know. I'm going to just say right now, I don't know too much about Project Almanac. I never saw it. All I remember is, when it came out, and it had like some kind of buzz of like, that's surprisingly decent, But I never really looked into if it was like meant to start a franchise. But I guess I will, and we'll find out. Maybe this is just the first of our Dean Israelite series.
When it comes to writing this film, Trev, we got some F2F to comes and F2F alums on this bad boy. This is written by a few people. John Gattens, he wrote Coach Carter, Flight, Kong Skull Island, the F2F film To Be Real Steel, and Need for Speed. We'll be talking about those movies one day. The story of this film is by Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless. This resume, Trev. Two of which we've talked about. Morbius, Madam Web, The Last Witch Hunter, and Dracula Untold. And
Speaking of Sony Universe.
Yeah, totally. And then another writing duo, Michelle Mulroney and Kieran Mulroney, who wrote Sherlock Holmes 2, The Game of Shadows. This is, of course, based on the long-running TV series created by Haim Saban. Budget of the film, $100 million. Domestically, it made $85 million, and worldwide, $142 million, which is not nearly enough what it needed to make. To give you a little bit of a comp here. First of all, it lost the studio upwards of $74 million. So again, reasons why they didn't make any more. But also, the 1995 film, The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, made $66 million worldwide on a $15 million budget. Now, right away, you're thinking, well, that's not a lot. And they did have a sequel, Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. Well, we talk about this a lot on this podcast, that video rental and VHS purchases and stuff like that used to save a lot of these films, and really that's what happened here. Power Rangers is a long-standing, long-running IP that has proven profitable on as The Rock will say, many verticals. So it that movie was saved by just the entire multimedia landscape in the 90s. Obviously, in today's world, in 2017, things are very, very different. So unfortunately, or fortunately, we did not get sequels to this one.
It should also be said that those movies, because you mentioned that this is an adaptation of the long-running series, but we should specifically say it is an adaptation, particularly of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Yeah. The one that kind of kickstarted it all, at least on the American side. We'll explain that in a moment. But just so like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, and then even Turbo, those movies were coming out while the show was still running with those actors. So it was kind of like it was promotion of the even bigger deal, which is the TV show, right? So the movies could do what they had to do, but they were ultimately almost seen like ancillary material to keep promoting the TV show. And like I know, like with even Turbo, it led right into like the next season, of like setting up, oh, the team is changing now and they're getting new powers. So this even though the Power Rangers franchise was still in existence when this movie came out, this was kind of doing its own thing, right? This is going back and saying, hey, let's reboot and readapt the original version. So it didn't even have that kind of connection to save it. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Why again, this one needed to be a bigger performer all by itself.
Totally. Hey, I got to ask you, because, we mention every once in a while to newcomers that, there's a bit of an age difference between me and Trev. Trev is a child of the 80s. I'm the child of the 90s. I'm going to ask you first.
Sure.
Because yours is probably more interesting. No? Okay.
I bet you mine's more long-winded.
Well, I mean, it always is. But your relationship with Power Rangers, the IP, all of that stuff. I mean, did you watch the show? Like how old were you when this? This aired from 1993 to 96. The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers started then. So
so that's for me. That's like 13 to 16. I was watching it, but I've mentioned this before. I know I mentioned this in my Letterboxd review of this movie, my original review, which we'll talk about later, or at least reference back to. But it started when I was 13. I certainly watched it, but I know it was one of the first shows I watched almost entirely ironically. Like I was watching it, I was enjoying it, but whereas I think a lot of really young kids watch it and we're just like really into it, right? Like, oh my God, these are these cool superheroes and it's got these like fun fight scenes and everything. I was definitely watching it like, ha ha ha, this is cheesy, and I'm enjoying it because it's cheesy. Like it was definitely one of the first things where I was very, very cognizant of that, of like, I'm watching this to kind of make fun of it. Now, what's interesting is like, I've almost like come around to it to where now in my 40s, obviously there's still an element of like irony, but I think like I'm even like less cynical to where I watch it and go like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? Like I think when I was a kid, I was watching it thinking I was like above it and like, haha, I'm watching it and making fun of it, not realizing actually I was just in on the joke that they were telling. It's kind of that like, it's kind of that Batman, the 66 Batman thing, where you can like, a lot of people watch it and say, oh, it's so dumb, it's so cheesy, and then later you realize, oh, actually that's what the writers were going for. They were making a satire, and I think Mighty Morphin Power Rangers I don't think it's a clever satire like Batman was, but I do think it wasn't taking itself very seriously. So I definitely watched it. I definitely enjoyed it. Like probably every kid who watched it, and like a lot of other people my age at that time, gigantic crush on Amy Jo Johnson. That was a very big part of it. Like, that's just one of my all time, crushes of like that age, right? Like, and just obsessed with the Pink Ranger. But no, I did find the show fun. I was also already by that point into like Godzilla and like Japanese monster movies, right? So this was just kind of a continuation of that. Definitely very aware of like the bizarre nature of the show, because it came out and it was very aware that like, oh, this is a Japanese show, but they're editing in like the American parts and like the weird disconnect there. Now, did I watch it like week to week, and was I up on all the mythology, and was I like, rushing home to catch the entire Green Ranger saga as it happened? No. It was more something I would just have on occasionally, and like I would enjoy it. But I was always like aware of it. I didn't see either of the movies in the theater, but I certainly caught up with them later, like on TV or VHS. But yeah, like I said, oddly enough, it's a series that I kind of came back to more and appreciated later more as I got older. Like a few years back, right around the time when this movie was coming out, actually, they put like all of the Power Rangers iterations on Netflix. And that's when I like really locked in and just started watching it and like really kind of enjoying it and saying like, okay, now when I'm watching it from start to finish, I mean, I didn't make it through all of it, of course, not all 20 versions of it or whatever.
It's also hard to go back. I tried a long time ago when they first popped up, and to watch those original episodes we say this a few times too, publicly and privately, but some things need to live in your memory.
Well, for the most part, I mean, I know what you mean. I think they are. I think that's part of what I still kind of find fun about them, though. Too, is they are this like weird relic, and I still do enjoy. Like I said, I'm enjoying it like on a somewhat ironic level, but just more. I feel like now I'm in on the joke as opposed to like making fun of it. So yeah, it's still a franchise I enjoy. I think there's something to be said for Power Rangers. There's the whole, we'll talk about the Super Sentai element of it. And I know there's like a part of me that kind of wants to like go watch those, just like the real versions before they're Americanized. And there's another part of me that just says like, no, what I kind of like about it is like this strange element of taking this like Americanization and trying to like rewrite the stories to fit the footage and everything. So yeah, I would say I'm a Power Rangers fan today still, probably even more than I was when I was younger, but it's definitely something I was aware of at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Power Rangers were my thing.
Yeah, of course.
Like this was, like, how old was I? 93? I was 5.
Yeah.
So 5 to 10 was when this show aired. That is perfect adolescent Chris. The idea that you could be a superhero by just being a teenager with attitude, and like you could like look forward to that, and your friends would get together. Like I grew up on a cul-de-sac. So, there was like one entrance into my neighborhood and out. So I got to know my neighbors very well, and we all kind of grew up together around the same age. So like me, my friend Adam, my friend Kyle, my friend Miranda, like we used to just play as the Power Rangers, right? And, I had so many toys. I had certain video games I played, not many, but like I know I had the toys, and I just looked on eBay today, certain of the toys that I had. Oh boy, I could have bankrolled this podcast till the fucking end of days with some of those toys. But yeah, Power Rangers was just, there was something cool about being in a group of your friends taking down evildoers, Mm-hmm.
I grew up on movies, The Goonies or even Star Wars, where it was all about team building and groups and friends, and this sell on Power Rangers is like you get to fight bad guys with your friends, and I feel like that's what being young is all about. Like the revolution of being young and figuring out how to sort of own your own power. I love that as a theme.
And it's martial arts, it's kaiju action, it's Transformers, all in one.
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, my number one thing in the world. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was always Jason the Red Ranger. I wanted that T-Rex so bad. I wanted to drive that thing around. There was something really special about the show, and I mean, it's never really gone away either. Like, times have changed for children, and how they consume media. But there was something for, a good 15 years, I would say, that, Saturday morning cartoons and the Saturday morning programming had this lineup in it, right? And there's been certain incarnations over the years that I never really stayed with it. I watched Mighty Morphin religiously, truly. Mm-hmm. And I used to record them on VHS tapes and label them, like even as a kid. And certain ones stick in my memory of like, remember the pig monster that ate them, and then they became little like decals on his stomach.
The best monster I've ever made. I just can't wait till he defeats the Power Rangers for good.
Terrifying.
Like the monsters were awesome. Let's face it. Like that was a big part of it. Yeah.
But like the guys in rubber suits and all that shit, like it just really, it shaped so much of my even adult sensibilities for media, and I look back so fondly on this IP. Mm-hmm. And it just had good messaging too. Again, it's you and your friends taking down bullies and bad people, and I think that's a cool message. And the lore gets really intense. It gets really crazy.
Yes. I have a story about that in a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. But no, I loved the show. I thought it was great. It's a show that you liked or loved every character. You know what I mean? Like everybody had their favorites. Like right now, I just said I was always Red Ranger, right? And I remember my friend Miranda was always Pink Ranger. And it's just funny to see that. And like when Tommy Oliver shows up, and you're like, oh fuck, and you have to like battle your friend to be the Green Ranger. You know what I mean? And then he becomes the White Ranger. Oh, spoilers.
Oh, Tommy was like also Tommy's been like everything. Tommy was like a Red Ranger later, and like
Yep. And Jason David Frank, the late Jason David Frank, unfortunately we lost him last year. He was such a proponent for this IP all these years up until his last days.
Yeah,
I think when he unfortunately passed away, he was like at a convention like that weekend. And
and he made a lot of cameos in like later iterations. We should just mention that too, because like you said the thing about how you didn't really keep up on it. I do want to talk about that really briefly about like what the like if we could just quickly please explain like the history of this, but also like how it even translated into the American version. Because like I'm kind of with you in that I didn't entirely keep up on it, but I still think it's also one of the things that makes the IP like fascinating and interesting and something I respect about it. So the origin of this is there's actually a very long running Japanese franchise called Super Sentai that started in 1975. And it basically is like every year they would do like a new version of the show, which would be a show about like, 5 or 6 young people who are given some kind of like themed superpowers and fight giant monsters. And basically the idea of Super Sentai is like every year or two, the name of the show would change, the characters would change, and even like what was the thematic nature of the superheroes would change, but it was still the same idea. It was always martial arts battles, giant robots, monsters, right?
Yeah.
But and that started in 1975, so it had already been running for quite a long time. And then at a certain point, you mentioned Haim Saban. Haim Saban got the idea of like, well, that show is like, that franchise is huge over in Japan. What if we did an American version of it? And even better, we don't even have to bother totally refilming the action scenes because the characters are all in masks, right? And so all we have to do is like we'll take the scenes of just the teenagers, the kids, and we'll film that. We'll get American actors, we'll film like the American scenes, but then we'll just like lease out the Super Sentai material, right? We'll actually buy that footage, and anytime they transform, we'll just cut to the Japanese footage. So that's what I meant about how I think there's something really interesting too about how I'm sure many of these episodes were kind of adaptations of the original Super Sentai episodes, but for the, I think a lot of them too, where they just kind of had to like kind of contextualize, what would be a story that would kind of fit around this monster, and then they would create that story. But yeah, so like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the initial American version was based on what was at that time the most recent Super Sentai series. But this put the American like show at, I don't want to call it a disadvantage. Maybe it was something exciting. Maybe it advantage to them is that every time the Japanese franchise would change, that meant they had to acknowledge that change in the American version as well. So we talked about with like Turbo, they ultimately had to like, there's suddenly their Power Rangers Turbo and there's Power Rangers Zeo. And they were trying to keep it going with like the same characters, but trying to justify these new team changes. Ultimately, where I started to drop out in that like Netflix rewatch is when we had kind of lost like every original main character.
Yeah.
And you would go into like completely new teams. But I still think it's kind of cool that if you kept sticking with it, right? Every year they started to do the same thing where the American ones would change. You'd get like Dino Rangers and Time Force Rangers. Some of these are real ones. Some of them I'm just making up. The only later one I started to get really into and then unfortunately never finished. I just kind of fell out of it. But me and my friends heard that there was a later one called Power Rangers RPM. And somebody told us that one was like really good. And the other reason I want to check it out was because one of the Rangers was Rose McIver from iZombie, and she stars on Ghosts now. And I was like a really big iZombie fan. I knew this is where she started, and I heard the show was good. So me and my buddies actually started watching that one on Netflix, and it was actually pretty awesome. I was like, oh, this one's good. It's like it was like filmed in Australia, and they were doing like a whole post-apocalyptic thing, and they were all like, obviously it was like car themed, so it felt kind of like Mad Maxy a little bit, And that one like ruled. And then every once in a while, I always like dove into like some of the other ones just randomly, like some of the stuff in like space and later things. Yeah. But I do think, and like I've seen like the crossover episodes, like Forever Red, of course, which was like where you're like, I don't know, like 18 seasons in or something, and they bring back every Red Ranger from all the previous shows, so you get to see them, and like that's great because like the original Jason actor shows up and he's now like 40 pounds heavier, and then he morphs and suddenly he's a thin Power Ranger because it's the Japanese actor. Like, oh, all right, but like I just think it's really cool that the Super Sentai franchise is still running. The Power Ranger franchise just kind of continues on, and I actually really like that, even if I haven't stuck with it. So I just thought it was interesting to like mention that as well.
Well, it's even like me and you both watched last year's it was like an anniversary special thing, right? I can't even remember what it was called. It wasn't that good. but
No, it was okay. Yeah.
But it was like it gives you what you kind of were signing up for. You know,
Yeah.
it's not great, and David Yost comes back, which is actually a big thing because David Yost has a well, I was going to say love-hate, but mostly hate relationship with the show because they just treated him very unfairly. He is gay, and the show kept either trying to hide it / making him like kind of bully him behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I kind of wanted to mention. So him coming back for this celebratory anniversary special last year was actually a big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, like reclamation for him.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Unfortunately, first of all, Walter Jones came back too. That guy doesn't age. It's unbelievable. That guy. I've seen him at many conventions in my time. Amy Jo Johnson didn't come back for that, which kind of sucked. And then neither did Jason David Frank, which is strange why he didn't. Because Austin St. John came back, and I know he has a weird history with the show too. He kind of went off the deep end in a lot of ways.
Jason David Frank not coming back was really surprising. It almost made me feel like, did they just not want to pay him, or because it just seems like he would, but to be like, so as you said, he did still remain like a pretty vocal proponent for the franchise, and as you said, he kind of came back. He played. I know he kept playing Tommy in multiple later iterations. I think he was even like kind of a main character in let's see here, Power Rangers Dino Thunder. I think had Tommy as like a big part of it. And then even Amy Jo Johnson, she has not turned her back on the franchise either. As recently as like last year, I believe she was writing a Pink Ranger comic book still.
Oh, cool.
So so she still like kind of stays like active with it as well. So
and also just still so beautiful. Oh
yeah.
Good for her. Yeah. Good for her.
But that's what an interesting thing about the movie too. And not to jump ahead too much, but like by the time this movie came out, it's just odd. I'm sure it's something we'll talk about like with the review and like why it maybe didn't hit as well as they wanted it to. Mm-hmm. But they were going back to like the 1993 characters, right? The original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers characters. And by the time this movie comes along, the Power Ranger franchise has kind of moved so far beyond that iteration, right? And like a younger audience would probably not even remember those characters. So you're really making a movie more to be nostalgic. This is one of those nostalgia plays, right? Let's try and get the original audience back. And was that the right decision? Obviously we'll talk about that. You would think maybe the answer's obvious already, considering we're covering this. But just something to consider.
Another actor from the main series we haven't mentioned yet, I think we should, is Toy Trang. She played Trini Kwan, the Yellow Ranger. Unfortunately, she passed in 2001 in a car accident. But the show and the subsequent celebratory special we even talked about always kind of props her up, and they never really forget about her, which is kind of cool. So the show has an interesting history, tragic, and like I keep saying, celebratory and ongoing. It's just a fascinating franchise. It really is.
That's what I meant to mention too, and I brought that up. Is like, so we said like it got to a point where like every year they would just like reboot it, right? Like the original cast. That's what. So I was just looked this up because I was trying to remind myself. I mentioned that where I fell out is when the original cast ended. So that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers cast, or essentially a version of it at least, goes through these iterations, right? So it started as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, then it became Power Rangers Zeo, and that's actually what they were when Turbo came out.
Right.
But then that led into Power Rangers Turbo. Then we had Power Rangers in Space, and then Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. And Lost Galaxy is really kind of considered the last season, which would be season 7 essentially. But that's the last of the original iteration with like any like characters from the beginning, And after that, just kind of starts becoming like new teams, new iterations, like every year or two. But that said, it's still maintaining something of a continuity. Right, is this idea that Power Rangers are this force that, like, whenever like the galaxy needs them, there's a version of Power Rangers. And as I said, I would check in from time to time. I'd watch the crossover episodes, and they'd even have little jokes about that. Right, you'd be in like season 14 or whatever, and a character would say like, "Oh, don't you get the Power Ranger newsletter or something?" And there'd be like this idea that they're very aware of the people who used to be Power Rangers, and that allows you to bring any old characters back. It allows you to kind of like step back and play those like nostalgia bits for the audience. But I like that too, and that comes to, I mentioned earlier, I have a story about that. One of the very first San Diego Comic-Cons I ever went to, or I think it was the first one, me and my buddies, who we were like, oh man, there's a Power Rangers like panel. We gotta go to this, right? Because we're just like, we gotta see like it was the panel for like whatever the newest version of Power Rangers was at the time. And I don't even remember what it was. And this was in that period where I think for a brief moment, like Disney had bought the Power Rangers and they owned it for like a little bit. They owned it for like a few seasons. And so they brought out like the new cast, and they of course went as they did their little spiel. They showed some clips, and then they decided to, and actually the person hosting the panel was the actor who played Bulk in the original show, who
Paul
actually
Schreier.
walked,
Paul Schreier.
Paul Schreier, who walked up to us in the line outside of the room, and I got a great picture with him.
Cool.
Really nice guy, but he was hosting the panel, and then they went to their Q&A, and remember that Simpsons episode about Comic-Con with the people asking? It was very, very much like that. You were getting... Now, and the thing is, it was no kids, right? Everybody got to ask a question, was 45 at least. And they got up, and their question... I'll never forget, one of them was like, is this new season considered canon with Power Rangers, Dino, whatever? Like, right? Like, from two... And, like, the actors... You could just see the actors look at each other like... What the fuck? Like they had no idea how to answer it. So that's like always been locked in my mind as like a funny moment about how you realize there are people who've stuck with every iteration of this and are very, very heavily invested. And I don't want to make fun of them too much because there are certain things like that. You know, I have Star Trek, so it's like people have their things, right? And I think it's cool that that's possible, that this show can like cultivate that.
And that's kind of what's interesting about like the movie that we're going to talk about is that this movie doesn't do the Lego sequel Force Awakens nostalgia play in that sense. You know, like this is not in the continuity. It is an absolute reboot of the entire franchise.
We always wanted to pay homage to the original show in terms of its spirit. And that's why I think what will be surprising is that it's all the same characters, but we've made them deeper and more complex and more nuanced, and we've pushed the emotion of it. So it's funny, but it's also really heart-rendering, I think. And I then wanted to make sure that we created a world that was unique unto itself, that wasn't borrowing from the other superhero movies that, in the last 10, 15 years have been dominating. I thought that this had its own legacy and sort of deserved its own unique take and world. So we tried very hard to make sure that our design feels kind of coherent within its own framework.
It's an interesting choice. Well, we'll talk about that choice in depth into the reasons why it may or may not work. But I kind of forgot about everything being so intertwined. Like even when I think back to the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, like I saw both movies in theaters, by the way. I saw the first one and then Turbo in theaters. Turbo I didn't like. Even as a kid, I didn't like it.
No, Turbo's terrible. Yeah.
But the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, I think is still to this day a cheese fest.
Oh yeah, I love that movie.
It's awesome. I love it. Like still to this day, me and my friends will text each other like voice memos, just teenagers, like of Ivan Ooze.
Ew, gross.
Too kind. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the galactically feared, globally reviled, universally despised. They call me Ivan Ooze.
Well, pack your bags, because we're sending you right back where you came from.
A teenager with a big mouth. Not much has changed in 6,000 years.
You obviously don't know who you're dealing with, Mr. Raisinhead.
Really?
Yeah, we're the Power Rangers.
Woo! Where's my autograph book? Ah!
And little things like ninjetti kick or something like that. Like it's so stupid. But in that movie, they replaced Jason Lee Scott as the Red Ranger, and then they replaced Toy Trang with another actress with the Yellow Ranger, and I think that was it, right? And then those two moved into the continuity with Turbo. I think that's what the whole idea was. But just in general, I just want to say that like those movies actually do hold a special place as well.
Yeah,
but,
I think by the time the movie came out, like the Red Ranger had already changed. I think it was already Rocky by the time
it was?
the
Okay.
movie came out. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, the only thing I'll give Turbo, which is a terrible movie, but it does have that moment where Kimberly, because Kimberly shows up for like a cameo.
Yes, that's all it is.
And there's a moment where she turns evil, and evil Kimberly is even more hot than just regular Kimberly.
Yeah, she can get it. She can get it. Okay, I want to mention very briefly the middle thing between this franchise and this movie and what gets it off the ground, okay? Because it came to me yesterday and I texted you about it because I kind of forgot that this happened in 2015, I think, or 2014. The rated R short film, directed by, oh my God, what's his name? Come on, tell me.
Joseph Kahn.
Joseph Kahn. By the way, I have heard Joseph Kahn in interviews before, and I've heard him on podcasts. The guy thinks he's hot shit, right?
He does, but you know what? I kind of think he's hot shit. I think he's an egotist in a funny way.
Big time. Yes.
But I kind of love Joseph Kahn.
Sure.
I'm a huge defender of. First of all, he made the movie Torque, which I love. If anyone doesn't know about Torque gets one of my highest recommendations always. So I don't know if you've seen Torque, Chris, but it was basically like Joseph. It was like in the first initial oh my God, Fast and the Furious is so big, we got to make 100 Fast and Furious ripoffs. And so there's Biker Boys and Torque, right? And he was this music video director. He's one of those guys, right? A huge music video director. Even still today, he directs a lot of music, and I know he's done a lot of Taylor Swift videos and everything. But they recruited him to make a Fast and the Furious. They were like, give us Fast and Furious with motorcycles, not knowing that he hates Fast and the Furious and he thinks it's stupid, right? So he takes this Fast and the Furious ripoff with motorcycles and decides to make it basically this subtle underground satire of Fast and Furious. So he makes it intentionally stupid, and Torque rules. And then he did this great time travel slasher horror comedy called Detention. He made a horror movie this year called The Ick, which I haven't seen, but people I respect really liked. So yeah, I like Joseph Kahn. This Power Rangers thing, well, we can talk about it.
Yeah, I don't want to just dissect it piece by piece. I really don't. I just want to kind of give brief thoughts on it because I just rewatched it today for the first time in 9 years. When I watched it back in the day, it stars Katie Sackhoff and James Van Der Beek is in it. And it's a really hardcore R-rated, super violent 15-minute short of all the Power Rangers, the OG Power Rangers, basically years into their careers being killed off. And then there's a mystery of who's doing it, who's behind it. Again, all in 15 minutes. I remember thinking it was really awesome back when I watched it in 2015. I was like, oh wow, this is so cool and interesting and just weird. It was very it was just different. And I think at that point I was like, oh wow, I never thought of an R-rated Power Rangers before. Watching it today, it goes back to what you say sometimes about certain IP-driven movies that we talk about that don't quite respect what came before. And I think I liked it 9 years ago. Looking back on it today, it's a little it's just not anything close to what Power Rangers was. So it's then what is this? You know what I mean? It's fairly well made, but it's just kind of, it's just what if Power Rangers were, murdered violently.
It's not even so much that it disrespects the franchise, it's that it indulges in one of my least favorite things about fandom, and I know you've heard me rail against this before. It's the audience who necessitates that their favorite franchises grow up with them.
Oh, totally.
Right? That they love something when they were 10, and now they're 30 or 40, and they still want to love it, but they don't want to feel embarrassed that they love something that's for kids.
Yeah.
So they need the franchise to grow up with them, and I hate that. You should either move on from what you loved as a kid or embrace the kid that's still inside you. I mean that in the most innocent way.
No, I agree.
Yeah. But just accept that it's still for kids. You can still enjoy it and have fun with it, and allow the next generation to enjoy it as well. It doesn't need to become R-rated because you've gone past the age where you should be enjoying it, right? And I hate that.
Yes.
And that short is that short is kind of the ultimate representation of that. And we saw there was a huge trend for a while of everyone wanting what if He-Man was a fucking R-rated thing? And it's it doesn't need to be. These things are kids' properties for a reason.
You know what's weird? It's trying to be more mature with your franchise love, it becomes extremely immature. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does this weird slingshot and back that hits you in the back of the face, and it's wait. I don't need to see, not that this is in the short, but I don't need to see Red Ranger's cock. You know what I mean? But that's the kind of vibe that short is going for. That if it was to be made into a hardcore 90-minute movie, there would definitely be like an outrageously, explicit sex scene. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like, it just doesn't sit right. I kind of liked that idea back then, but as I have now aged 9 more years, it just doesn't grow with me. So I agree. I'm kind of leaving that in the past as well. So
but no, I think it's worth bringing up because you said like it was part of the producer of that is Avi Shankar or whatever, and he's like big on that whole like bootleg universe thing, right? Where he makes like these like and we talked about another one he did, which was the Punisher short he did with Thomas Jane, right? And that we loved that, right? And he did like a Venom one. I remember that Joe Lynch directed with Ryan Quanten, and I liked that as well. And so it's like some of those are fun. This one not so much, but it's worth bringing up because it got enough attention that I think it certainly played into, at least the initial beginnings of this movie even getting going, right? And people thinking like, ooh, you know what? This looks like it could be a big screen property in a way that's not as like corny and cheesy as the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, right? Maybe there's something here in a post, MCU, world where we can make a more serious version of this.
Yeah. Like, this movie was announced in 2014. The short came out in 2015. But then when this movie started to be kind of filmed, and really, really put together, it's definitely going for that more grounded, gritty edge to it. You know what I mean? Like I have the director, Israelite saying, it's going to feel very grounded, but at the same time very contemporary with a real edge to it and a real gut to it. It's going to be fun and joyful, but one that feels completely grounded in a real world with real characters going through real things. Which is something I actually like that quote. Like I like what it's doing and I like what it's setting up, but it's definitely less about, which we'll talk about, less about the suits and the wham bam of the fun cheesiness and more about it being set in this world with real problems. So there's no doubt that short and the attention that it got influenced the filmmakers to take this one a little bit more serious.
Yeah, because this is a movie that had like kind of a, I don't want to say complicated, it's just pretty standard with a movie of this size, and we've had 100 conversations like this now, right? But it's a movie that went through a lot of iterations even before it got before cameras. Like when they first announced it, I know like Roberto Orci was attached to produce. He had to leave to go work on Star Trek Beyond. Ooh, should we talk about that for a while? Should we talk about Star Trek Beyond for a while? No? Oh, all right.
Hey, I like Beyond. Don't we?
No, yeah,
I thought we liked Beyond.
No, we do. I didn't know if you wanted me to get going on Star Trek. That's all I'm saying.
No.
Okay. Yeah. See, well, I'll just say Beyond rules. But for a while, like Ashley Miller and Zach Stentz, who were like, had written like Thor and X-Men First Class, they were like brought on to write it for a while. The really infamous one, I don't want to say infamous, it's more that he was infamous, right? But the script that I know had gained like a lot of steam, and I eventually, like a lot of people read online, including me, I've read it, was Max Landis wrote a script for this that was like, some people really, really enjoyed it. Kind of was very much a Max Landis script. It had his tone.
So it was bad.
This is where it gets complicated, right? Because I personally don't think Max Landis is a bad writer. Obviously not a great human being, but I remember reading that script and being like, I can see how this would be a fun movie. But the reason, what I wanted to bring up is that eventually they have specifically turned his script down because they felt like it was too goofy and too cartoony. And it was essentially, that's where they're like, no, we do want a grittier movie. We want something more like steeped in realism. And again, I have to imagine that's because of this short gaining the attention. Yeah, so that's definitely like what actually like jettisoned his script,
Definitely. Yeah, so if you're gonna make a big Hollywood adaptation of this franchise, you're gonna need big Hollywood actors, and all 5 of the teenagers of the movie are fairly unknown, but they went to Bryan Cranston to play Zordon, and Elizabeth Banks to play Rita Repulsa. Yeah. So what we found was interesting about this is not only are they pretty big names then and still today, obviously, but Bryan Cranston kind of has a little bit of history with this franchise as it is. When he was kind of up and coming actor at the time in the 90s, he was hired for like $50 an hour or something to voice over a lot of the monsters that we talked about. So from those old Japanese episodes, he would do the English dubbing for their voices, a lot of them actually. And so in a twist of fate, all these years later, they went out to him and saying, "Hey, do you want to play Zordon?" And he was, gung ho. I'm sure they paid him a lot. but he was gung ho. There is the rumor that Billy Cranston in the show, in the American show, is named after him. Is that actual real, or is that just us faking it?
People want that to be true so much, and I get it. Obviously, it makes sense, but I think it has been shown that there was a previous script that like Saban or Shuki Levy or somebody had already written for like a different show that had a character named Billy Cranston, and that was before they ever met Bryan Cranston. It sounds like it would line up, but no, unfortunately, it's not true.
Okay, I did not want to perpetuate a lie.
Yeah.
Because we don't.
But no, I do love that Cranston was enthusiastic about coming back, and certainly was like willing to talk about his past with this show.
I got a job dubbing some of the dialogue from Japanese into English. I always did the monsters and things. You will not escape me. That kind of thing.
Goodbye, Power Rangers!
Leave my friends alone, you snake!
That was a long time ago.
Brian was paid $50 an hour for that voiceover work, and now he's back in the $5 billion Power Rangers franchise, playing Zordon, the group's boss.
Like, this is like, I'm sure you remember too, like when a lot of the world during the Breaking Bad days were learning that Bryan Cranston was actually this like really funny guy. Like they kind of forgot that he had already done Malcolm in the Middle, which is like where I first was like, oh, this guy rules, right? Like the dad is the best part of the show. And so I was really in that camp where when Breaking Bad started, it was weird for me. I was like, the dad from Malcolm in the Middle? Like, I don't know if this is going to work. And then of course gives one of the best TV performances of all time. One of the best like depictions of a, regular person slipping into evil. But I loved that like, he still never lost like that kind of joy and sense of humor outside of Breaking Bad. And I love, especially like as Breaking Bad was wrapping up, he was just becoming such a go-to like funny guy in like con appearances and talk shows.
My question is, because I grew up in Albuquerque, what was there any cool places, anything that you liked being there? Like, how was it? Because it's my hometown. So I want to know, how'd you like it? Well, did you have fun there?
Yeah, I'd go and visit your mother once in a while.
Oh, that was a little mean.
But also like one of the things that made me like just kind of, I already loved him, but I just had to like respect how much he was like, yeah, of course I wanted to come back for the Power Rangers movie. I did the show, and it's like he didn't act like this was just a pay gig, or like it was beneath him. It seemed like he was really like, yeah, it's a part of my history. It seems like it's fun. Why not?
And I'll just say it now before we get into the review right away. But he adds a sense of gravitas and
he does,
like an odd threat. It's just there's something there in his performance that he's actually giving a real performance and not just a voiceover thing. So no, we'll talk about the movie. I don't know. Do you want to talk about the movie now? Do you have anything left in your notes? I'm ready to go.
No, let's get to it.
All right. It's Morphin Time.
None of us really know each other, but we were all in the same place when Billy found those coins.
What is that? Don't you feel weird?
We're strong.
I'm saying be strong.
The answer to what is happening to you is here. You five are the Power Rangers. Any other questions?
Are we more like Iron Man or Spider-Man?
Could you just say something? Anything.
Me and 4 kids found a spaceship buried underground.
Whoa!
Pretty sure I'm a superhero.
What?
Guys?
5 little rangers. How cute.
Okay, now that's cool. Let's go.
Yeah! Power Rangers!
Yeah!
Power Rangers, rated PG-13, in theaters March 24th.
High school outcasts stumble upon an old alien ship where they acquire superpowers and are dubbed the Power Rangers. Learning that an old enemy of the previous generation has returned to exact vengeance, the group must harness their powers and use them to work together and save the world.
Very, very simple for a movie that essentially is a feature-length adaptation of the original 22-minute pilot, Day of the Dumpster.
Yeah.
So, and I know we'll talk about that during our review. But Chris, why don't you go first, as this was the one I gifted to you. I think I know, because you and I have talked about this movie before, but maybe it's changed. I don't know. Who knows? This was was this like a second watch for you, or how many times you visited this? Like, tell us your entire history with this and how you feel about it now.
Sure. Yeah, I obviously was very excited for this movie to come to theaters. I was one of the few that went to it the first week or so. I walked away from my theatrical viewing of it loving it. I thought this was a fresh, new, interesting, and entertaining version of the characters I used to love. It fixed a lot of the problematic Power Rangers colors of this one was really focused on a lot of diversity and whatnot, just like a lot of things are, but this one did it so naturally and beautifully, I thought. And we'll talk about each actor and their character in depth together, so I'm gonna wait to do that with you. But I thought this was just really, really good. This does what a franchise starter should do, in my opinion. And then I bought it on Blu-ray. I watched it a couple months later. I brought friends over to watch it. They didn't love it like I did. I remember that distinctly, feeling a little bummed out that they were just like, oh, it's Breakfast Club and, a superhero movie. And I was like, yeah. And what's wrong with that?
Two great things,
Yeah, I was like, well, put them together. Like, fuck, it's like, peanut butter and jelly. What's going on? Yeah. But whatever. And then I rewatched it for the first time since 2017, a couple nights ago with my fiance. And she had never seen it, and I watched it again, and I still think this movie rocks. It's kind of a tragedy that it never got any more. I left saying to Brittany, I said, this is one of the better superhero origin movies, and especially ones that we kind of cover for even this podcast. Like even in the YA-esque, sense of everything, right? And I just felt like this one had so many of the right ingredients, so many of the right pieces to put a second outing together that really fucking hit.
Yeah.
And I think if this cast especially, oh my God, this cast is so good. Their chemistry is so natural and so real and so warm. You have to buy that these five will be best friends to the end. And I think this movie nails that. And I think that's the most important thing to a Power Rangers movie, for me to buy into them getting into suits and getting into Zords and fighting Rita Repulsa and Goldar. I need to actually give a shit about my five heroes. And I think this, on a fundamental, emotional level, this movie works the best. And like I said, it's a real tragedy. We didn't get any more. But I thank you for gifting it to me. I wanted to revisit this for many years now, doing this podcast, and I really enjoyed it still, and I hope you did too. And I will throw it to you.
Yeah, like you, I also saw this its opening weekend, and kind of the same thing. Like going into it at the time, kind of like, hoping it would just be kind of like goofy good time, right? Being like, oh, the thing I like about Power Rangers is it's silly and funny, right? So hopefully this movie will be like that. And then kind of walking out of it like, like they actually made a good, like, serious Power Rangers movie right now. And I will talk about that, right? When I say I don't mean it's not the gritty, dark Power Rangers. It still has a sense of levity. But I think that what Dean Israelite said about it feeling like grounded is accurate, right? So like you, I quite enjoyed it in theater, bought it on Blu-ray, have watched it since, and was excited to revisit it the other night, and still quite enjoy it for sure.
Awesome.
Awesome. It's a very good, a very fun movie. Now, what's interesting is you mentioned the thing about how it's a great superhero origin movie. And that's what I really want to lock in on, because as I watched it, what I did start to kind of key in on, I'm curious to hear what you think about this, is because of the nature of the film and kind of the structure of it, it is arguable that it's not a super, super successful Power Rangers movie,
sure,
right? And that it's not often delivering on everything people expect from Power Rangers as an IP and as a franchise, right? A lot of the movie is not doing that. But it is a really good superhero origin story about these teenagers, right? Like, I know this sounds weird, right? But it doesn't really become the Power Rangers movie I think people are expecting until the last half hour. And I know a lot of people butt up against that. but that's actually kind of one of the things I like about it. In that, as I said, I'm not being flippant. This is basically the pilot of the show. And I encourage everyone to go watch that pilot and then watch the movie. Because the pilot in 22 minutes has Rita Repulsa escape from her like moon base, has like these 5 teenagers get recruited by Zordon and get made into the Power Rangers, has their like first battle with like the putties, then their first like battle with the giant monster, their first use of like the Zords, the first turning into like the Megazord. 22 minutes that all happens. There is no character development. It is insane, right? No. And that's kind of the fun of it, right? It's like oh my god, this is just, it's so fast. And what this movie is allowed to do, and I know this is like a budgetary decision, right? This movie, $100 million is nothing to sneeze at, but it's also like maybe not as much as a movie like this probably needed, you know? Mm-hmm. And so because of that, they're like, well, we can really only have one big action spectacle. We'll just save it for the end. And that means they actually made this interesting decision to say, well, what if the first hour is just this kind of like character piece about watching these 5 teens like come together and realize they have to work together. And in this, they're kind of, you know, they were just like 5 friendly teenagers who were already good natured and were like picked because they would be a great team in that original pilot. And here they're all in detention. They all have these problems. There's no reason they should get along. They don't get along at first, right?
But they're not mean to each other.
No, they're not mean. They're not mean-spirited. They're like they're delinquents and things like that, but we understand it all too, right? Mm-hmm. We will learn all of their like motivations for who they are and why they did the things they did. But you can tell they're all good-natured and good-hearted.
I think they all have a degree of an archetypical character to them. So Jason is the football star hero, but we've tried to turn each of these archetypes on their ear a little bit. So he's the fallen football hero. Kimberly is sort of the pretty girl, popular girl that has been ostracized from that group. Billy is someone who's invisible. And lives in his own world, in his own bubble, and has never had friends. Zach is the kind of renegade, rebel, wild kid that has a really complicated backstory to why he separates himself from people. And Trini is this loner, quiet girl that when she begins to speak, she sort of reveals so much depth to what she's going through. And so they're all disparate. And when they begin to open up, they all realize that the teenage problems that they're facing are universal and that they can understand each other on a deep level.
But we still get to spend all this time with them and see that bond form, see them like accept this like responsibility putting on them, see them come together as a team. I love that you can call it corny. There's a lot of things that are corny about this movie, but I love the idea that like their ability to morph is like so tied into how much they care for one another and the sense of like, you know, self-sacrifice for the good of the others. It's cheesy, but cheesy in a way I love. And it's just, you spend time with these characters. Like you said, the actors, the chemistry they have is so great together. So yeah, it's a weird thing where I love this movie. I will say that. But I love it more as like this like almost like original IP, you know, piece about these like this like teenager superhero team, and less as like a really great adaptation of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I think it gets there, and I think that's what I think where I agree with you is that I think the sequels would have been better on that, right? Especially if they could have had an increased budget. But I think this movie really cleverly plays its origin cards, and I think it's really fun watching this team develop throughout this 90 minutes or so.
I love when characters meet by happenstance and become better together. You know, and I just love that about group dynamics, especially in the superhero world, you know, and, you know, it's an age old trope and it's, you know, destiny and all that shit, but it really works for Power Rangers. And, you know, I think back to the old show and I loved, you know, Jason, I loved Tommy, I loved Kimberly, Billy, Zach, Trini. Like I loved these characters, and it was a awesome thing at the end of every episode of them getting into their suits and fighting the big bad, right? Like it was almost like I earned it, you know. And I feel like this adaptation in 2017 does that. I feel like I gotta earn these suits just like these characters do, and in the process I grow to love all of them. I'll say right now, the MVP in my eyes is R.G. Cyler, who plays
Easily.
Billy.
Yes.
Dude, that guy is so good. I talked about diversity earlier and how important it was to the filmmakers of this movie. Trev knows this about me. Obviously, I'm for diversity. I'll say that right now, okay? But I butt up against when diversity becomes kind of this weird slap in the fucking face, and it loses sense of the characters or anything about it. It's like we're doing it to get headlines. Now, in this movie, Billy is kind of an autistic, on the spectrum loner. But it's not played for like this weird, like overboard way. You know what I'm trying to say? Like it's not like this we get it. It's not it's more of like an afterthought. Like it's shining a spotlight on it, but also saying that this guy is just a normal guy too. And he's actually the heart of this whole film. And he's naturally funny. Like he's really funny, but again, he's the heart. He really is keeping this team together through whatever they're going through. And later on in spoilers, we'll talk about it, but he is the glue. And I think there's certain things in this movie, like, it gets away from making the black kid the Black Ranger, which is, I think, a good thing.
Great little joke about that in here too.
There is, yes. And then, the Yellow Ranger isn't Asian. So that's a good thing too. So it fixes those problematic issues that people think about with this show, especially with the hindsight we have nowadays. But it doesn't beat you over the head. And I think all of these characters you just really grow to love, and they love each other. And it's not like this, if Joseph Kahn got his way, it'd be like a will they, won't they, are they all gonna fuck kind of, movie. But I just feel a real bond and a real friendship between everybody. And, I've listened to a lot of cast interviews doing the legwork to the podcast and everything. And you can tell that they all just kind of got along. And they were all kind of bummed out that they can't do any more.
Yes, exactly. You mentioned that earlier about how like the cast chemistry and how you wish they had got another go at it. And like maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but sure. I'm with you in that. This is, of all the movies we've done, this is definitely one of the ones where I'm like really bummed they never got to do more. And for me, a big part of that is seeing how much this cast wanted to do more. They were all so game to come back. And like you said, like I was watching the same things when the movie came out, and even like a little bit in the aftermath of it. These 5 actors loved each other, and they wanted to make a series of these because they wanted to keep working together. And like I think that's the ultimate bummer of this, is that they didn't get to like keep going with these characters and get to like explore this more, because that is again like what's really cool about this movie as a piece of like Power Rangers IP is that it was able to do what the show never really was. Like I said, I've watched multiple seasons of the show. I enjoy it, but that 22-minute like frame really didn't allow for character exploration, right? It was like the barest bones of character exploration. And here we get this like these full character pieces for all of them. Like I'd say maybe Trini is like maybe the least developed here, but again, you could have done more in sequels. But it's like they all have their piece. They're all given this like interesting backstory. Their like bond coming together is fully explored here. Will some people watch it and like kind of roll their eyes during that and be like, can we get to the action? Sure. Yeah. But the other thing about this movie is that it came out in 2017, right? We were already, pretty deep in like inundation of superhero movies that are nothing but action. And it would have been really easy to make a version of this movie where they just get their suits and they start like kicking ass 20 minutes in, and I think that's how 70% of people would approach this movie.
Yes.
And I think you're right that because the way it plays it, when they finally do get their suits, you talk about it being earned, it's so satisfying.
Oh yes.
You're like, yes, I've been waiting for this. And it's not even, people are going to think I'm saying it's satisfying because you're like, oh, I get to finally see them like kick ass. And it's not that. It's satisfying because it's like, they did it. You're like proud of them. Like they've been waiting the whole movie for them to get to this moment where they like understand what they are and they understand how important they are to each other. And that's like the thing that like unlocks their morphing. And I know how silly that sounds. And that's the other thing is like,
it's earnest though. That's the thing. It's earnest.
Yes. And so I've seen reviews for this movie, and I have friends who don't enjoy this movie as well. And I often will see, I've heard the complaint where they're like, it's like Power Rangers, but it's taking itself too seriously. And there's such a difference between like grounded and serious, right? Because this is not a serious movie. This is a movie that knows how to perfectly thread the needle of like, let's play this realistic, let's play it grounded, but they still say it's morphin time. They still spend the whole movie talking about how they have to morph. You still have Rita Repulsa as the villain. You have we'll talk about all the Krispy Kreme stuff, but it's a movie that like proudly actually wears its silliness on its sleeve.
There's a tiny little robot that yells at them.
It, right? Yeah. Alpha 5 is still there,
Yeah.
It's the silliness is there, and it's just I love like the awkward balance of silliness and seriousness in this movie. I think it like makes the movie more interesting. And like the last thing I'll say about that is what was refreshing for me about these characters at this time is that this was the point where, I don't know about you, but I was already starting to hit that wall about like how, the MCU had really set like Hollywood filmmaking in general into that, like, and you and I are Buffy fans and everything. And we enjoy the Joss Whedon Avengers movies, but that like Avengers Joss Whedon speak, right? Where everyone talks like that. It's just constantly sarcastic, constantly flippant. And like these characters aren't like that, right? There's jokes that are cracked, but they talk like real kids, I think. And they just feel like real kids. And this movie's more interested in like exploring their character dynamics than it is just always having a joke punctuate every scene. So I loved that too.
I'm so glad you mentioned that they feel like actual teenagers because, we were positive on monster trucks, right? And our two characters are quote unquote teenagers in the movie, but they're played by almost 30-year-olds, right? And you can see it. Like you can see it even just obviously on their face, but even the way they speak. But in this one, I really did feel that the 5 were, teenagers with real problems, and, can
teenagers with attitude? Is that what you would say?
Well, it's also teenagers with attitude too, though. Like even because we were when the movie opens up with the car crash thing, and then, Kimberly is like cliff diving at night, and then they're all in like detention. Brittany looked at me and goes, "Oh my God, like who cliff dives at night?" And I said, "She's got attitude."
Yeah.
Like these are teenagers with attitude. They don't play by everybody's rules of the world. They're still in detention. They're still, they have edge to them, but they all have a reason to have edge to them, which I always liked. Like here, I'm just going to kind of say a few things here. Jason Scott, the Red Ranger, he's the leader. He fails at a prank and has a run-in with the law, and now, he's not the quarterback of the school of the school football team anymore, right? Blue Ranger, he's, like I said, he's on the spectrum. He's a little bit of a loner, and he gets bullied. The Pink Ranger, Kimberly. She's the high school cheerleader. She's the most popular girl in school, but she's got a secret that she's holding back, and that got her into detention. And it's kind of like a cyberbullying thing. And you know what? That shit's real.
Yeah, and you know what I love about that too is that the movie doesn't take the easy way out of saying that it's a misunderstanding or she was framed. No, she did it.
She did it.
She did it, and now she feels horrible about it, and she has to like deal with the repercussions of it. And I love that too. It's saying, hey, you know what? Your heroes can make horrible mistakes, and they can overcome them. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trini, the Yellow Ranger, she's the new girl in town. She has difficulty, making friends, but she's also under the surface dealing with maybe some sexuality issues, not issues, but she doesn't know how to come out to her perfect family, and then Zach, the Black Ranger, his mom is sick and he is trying to escape coming home to her being dead. And he's kind of a wild man and just trying to make the best of life before something horrible happens.
Yeah.
And it's just all 5 of those characters have real world problems that aren't world-threatening alien fucking invasion issues, you know what I mean? Or but they are just so personal and simple and 100% a teenager issue. Not 100% a teenage issue, but you know what I mean, right? You know what I'm saying.
Zach is the one where I would point to like anyone who I'm like, if I'm talking about this movie and saying like, hey, I think this movie takes its characters seriously or whatever. Because Zach, when you first meet him, you think you get that character immediately, right?
Yes.
You're like, oh, he's like the really sarcastic one. He's the asshole. He's the one who's going to be like so hard to deal with, and that's because that's how they play him at first, right? And then the movie peels back that layer and reveals that like, oh, that's like kind of all a smokescreen for him. and he acts like this because he's trying to hide the pain of how this thing he's dealing with his mom at home.
Yeah.
And the scenes with him dealing with his mom are so sensitively portrayed, right?
Big time.
And then the moment where they have their little where they tell each other their secrets around the fire, and he reveals his whole thing about taking care of his mom and how scared he is of what's happening with her. Just like, oh my God, this. What is this doing in a Power Rangers movie? but I'm so glad it's here, right? And I think I agree with you that Billy is the MVP, but Zach, I also walked away from it being like, man, I love what they did with that character, because it would have been easy to have him just be the. You mentioned Breakfast Club, and he could just be the Bender, right? And I look, well, the thing that's great about Breakfast Club is they also have layers to them. But I would say they're trying to explore that even more here with Zach, right? And I just think it's cool. He's not just the delinquent asshole. There's something more beneath it, and I love that we get to see him reveal that to his friends, and it's important for him to reveal to his friends.
You have all that depth in these 5 characters, and then we got to sprinkle some TV show in this. And enter Elizabeth Banks as Rita Repulsa, doing probably one of her best performances that I've seen in a long, long time.
I mean, it's one of my favorite, yeah.
It's funny because we covered, I can't remember the year, 2019, we covered Charlie's Angels, which was her directorial debut, ? Which starred Naomi Scott, who's Pink Ranger in this, by the way. Elizabeth Banks as Rita Repulsa is fantastic. Her performance fits so well in this movie, but also, like I said just now, you could have just copy-pasted her performance into the TV show and it would have worked as well, which is wild when people like to argue with me that this movie takes itself too seriously.
I know, yeah.
It's like the people that said that about The Batman. Me and you have talked about this. 2022's The Batman. When everybody's like, oh my God, it's so serious. It's just like Christopher Nolan films. I'm like, you saw Colin Farrell waddle like the Penguin, right? And basically quack. Give me a break. I think this movie really has a firm hold on tone, and I think that is very difficult for something like this. That you can have such depth and great character work with the heroes, but then you can give me a totally insane, campy goofball of a performance with the villain. And I think that's awesome.
You have to, because like I said, this is what I mean about threading that needle perfectly, right? Because for everything for all the praise we're heaping on how seriously they treat the 5 Rangers and their backstories and everything, we don't want an entire movie of just that. No. I love that they're doing that. I love that the characters are that explored and that they finally feel like real kids as opposed to the TV show. At the same time, it still needs to be a Power Rangers movie, right? Yeah. And so that's what there has to be this balance of seriousness and silliness. And Rita Repulsa, she's called Rita Repulsa. She's the perfect avenue to bring the silliness. And yeah, Elizabeth Banks is just amazing this because, it's such a cliche at this point, right? But she understands the assignment. She comes in, and I've always just thought I love actors who want to do this kind of performance, who are just because Elizabeth Banks is a really good actress, right? She can do comedy, she can do drama, but sometimes I think actors just want to be oh, fuck it. I'm not worried about drama at all at this point, right? I just want to play to the cheap seats, I just want to give the biggest, most hammy performance in the world, and that's what she's doing here, and she is so fun. It's a very different version of Rita Repulsa than we had in the TV show. She looks different, she has a different origin, and she's a former Ranger herself that went rogue and killed her old team. Yeah. So it's quite different, right? But it still just allows her to be comic book cartoon supervillain, and I think that's what saves the movie from being the dour, serious, model infest that some people accuse it of being, is that you can have all those scenes with the Rangers that explore that stuff, and then you cut to Rita Repulsa at a Krispy Kreme eating a donut, or whatever the case might be, and it's okay, good. She's our balance here for sure.
Yeah, it cut to a jewelry store where she's literally eating gold jewelry, and then bringing a rock CGI rock creatures out of the ground, and totally realistic stuff.
Yeah.
The original Rita Repulsa in the show, she was played by a few different actresses, but each of them really brought sort of a very arch sensibility, really broad, really big, a cackle, crazy headdress and, crazy outfits. And we wanted to keep a sense of that. Not so much the look of what she looked like, but the sense of someone who is larger than life. right? Who's big and broad and brassy and ballsy and takes no prisoners and just is very determined to win. And that was always Rita throughout the series. And I think it's that attitude that we tried to bring.
I wanted to say, I guess right now I'll say some negativos to the film, where I sort of understand why it didn't work. And I think we have kind of said it, that it became something else that me and you both really enjoy. You know, like I think it became almost its own thing, you know, for 60% of the movie, 70% of the movie. It became really its own thing with a Power Rangers label slapped on it, right? But I think that's what we think we would say, that it has elevated the IP, right? Mm-hmm. And done something different. However, I could tell that my fiance was getting a little impatient.
Yeah.
A little impatient and a little bit like, okay, enough training, you know, enough walking around, you know, where are their suits? Mm-hmm. And I get it, because as much as I know it's earned, and when they fucking slow-mo walk to that Daft Punky-ish fucking Tron's music score, it's just like, fucking rights, let's go kick some putty ass, right? Yeah. However, it does take too long. And I said 3 things make the Power Rangers show, right? And it's, you know, that I loved. It was, you know, the kaiju action, the transforming dinosaurs, and the martial arts. This movie doesn't really have martial arts. And I think
one brief sequence, yeah.
And it's so brief, and it's not shot the best. I'll say that because of the CGI putty people that they're fighting. But I also have a feeling it's to do with the suit design. I will defend the suit design in this movie. I like that it's kind of this metamorphosis, this alien technology that kind of comes out of them. They do look more like the Guyver than they do Power Rangers. But hey,
the
what?
The Guyver? Look it up. Trust me, I'm right.
Okay. okay. I'll take your word for it. However, those suits look cumbersome as fuck. And you can't really do acrobatic, awesome martial arts in them. So it does lose that. And then they get into their Zords like way too quickly. And their Zords don't have the best design either. They're a little too chunky alien
they're over-designed,
to them.
Right?
Over-designed. Beautiful.
This is the Transformers like result, right? Sure, I know you love those movies, but I think even you would acknowledge that, like,
I agree,
the Transformers movies did lose the simplistic Transformers design in the cartoon, and ever since then, every robot has to be like have 3,000 moving parts instead of just 2, right? And so,
yes. So it's like, there's as awesome as that last 20-30 minutes is. I know that it's not enough for the people that waited until that last half hour. You know what I mean?
It's strange, because this is where we come back to our question about, was this the right call to go back to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? And I get it to a certain degree, right? So on one hand, we talked about how at this point, in 2017, what are we, like 20 seasons into the show or something, right? There's been multiple iterations. The continuity has grown insane, right? So by going back and saying, let's just reboot, go back to Mighty Morphin, which still is the most iconic version. It is the one most people still remember primarily. But by going back and doing a reboot, you're abandoning years of complicated continuity, right? It's not even a question. Don't worry about it. We're just going back to the beginning. You don't have to know anything else about Power Rangers. So that's a good call, right? But it also does mean there's a couple factors to keep in play there. You want to sell this to a younger audience? Well, the younger audience isn't going to know these characters, right? They're going to be more aware of some of the later versions of Power Rangers. But that younger audience is also going to come to this movie, and that audience is definitely going to be the one who's like, why are they sitting around a campfire talking about their mom dying, for the first half? When are they going to fight a monster,
Yep.
And the older audience, like us, who does respect that, even some of that audience is like, again, this is still, again, the heyday of like the MCU and everything like that. They're just kind of like, I don't know, we've sat through so many of these movies, right? Like, you and I really appreciate like a good superhero origin movie, but people were pretty burnt out on this genre by this point, including us, So it's like a movie that came at the wrong time, playing to the wrong audience. It's really tricky, right? And I agree, like, it doesn't bother me how long it takes, but I understand when other people are like, boy, I sure wish there was at least one more big action scene in it. And I don't think that's wrong. I think it's a fair criticism. I try to defend it by saying I don't think they had that high of a budget in this movie. I think they did what they could with what they had. but that excuse only gets you so far, you know?
Yeah, like why not have them have a group martial arts fight against putties without their suits early on and have them lose?
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, I'm going to get into spoiler territory here a little bit, but, you know, the real quote unquote middle action scene that they get is Rita lures them all to like a shipping dock, like a fishing dock, and captures them and then drowns Billy. And there's no action that really happens, and they have to revive Billy by, you know, becoming one with the Morphin Grid and all this other stuff. You go see the movie. Go see the movie, okay? But why couldn't that have been an action scene? You know, like, why did it have to have them netted up against a fucking shipping boat and then drowned? It could have been like a big action scene, but I will defend it by saying it was probably the budget, even though it was $100 million. I don't know. It just, there's something missing in the middle of the movie where I know and could understand why people butt up against it 100%.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that would
again,
have been
I saw Britney squirming. I saw her squirming and I saw her on her phone and I'm like, okay. and yet she was laughing with it. She really liked Billy. She was having a good time. But then at the end of the movie, I asked her, I said, so what did you think? And she goes, why were they training for the whole movie? And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, you either love a good like training sequence or you don't, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know, like again, like there was a lot of training in like 80s movies and stuff. So maybe I'm just more endured to it or whatever. But
I think this what it is too, and to kind of like bounce off of what you were saying about the generations relationships to this this franchise. There is so much expository dialogue in this movie, and sometimes I feel like it just is it is needed, but it's not needed at the exact same time. It's so weird because, again, this franchise has never truly gone away. It is still extremely popular. It is still making a lot of money, even though Saban sold all the rights off to Hasbro. It is still making a lot of money, and it's still something in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
So in 2017, is there a need for 15 minutes of Zordon telling everybody about how the Power Rangers work and what morphing will do? Probably not. But I understand if they're going for that younger generation, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, that also is the stuff that makes it a Power Rangers movie, right? And ultimately, like
Totally.
that's still what I still enjoy, because I said it's this. I guess I'm understanding that I can see two people just butting up against what you and I are appreciating about it, right? And sometimes people just clue in on certain things that are so strange they like it. This is like a serious, like, not, again, I don't want to use the word serious in like a negative way, but so let's just keep going with grounded and realistic, even though I'm starting to get sick of saying it. But it's this like grounded, realistic teen movie about these teens with like real issues, and they're like bonding and finding themselves, and like, you know, self discovery and the importance of friendship and putting someone else's life above yours. And then it will cut to them being like, have you morphed yet? You know, or Rita Repulsa going, make my monster grow. And it's like, it's such a bizarre, like, you know, those things are butting up against each other. And I love that. I love that it's like bouncing back and forth between the silliness of the IP and like what they're aiming for. And I think that's what makes it interesting. And ultimately, the reason this felt like kind of a breath of fresh air to me in the midst of this whole like comic book superhero glut that had been going on and is still going on is that as much as I enjoy a lot of those movies, even still, even a lot of the ones I like don't slow down for this kind of character stuff. You know?
Yeah.
I think that's why we all respond so much to the James Gunn Guardians of the Galaxy movies, because he was ultimately, of all the Marvel filmmakers, I think he was the one who understood the most of saying like, let's really explore the characters too. You know, like let's make you fall for these characters in an emotional way. And a lot of the other Marvel movies are just like, well, you like the characters because you understand they're superheroes. They're fun. Let's just mostly concentrate on that. And the fact that this movie does like slow down and take forever to get to the action, I see as a positive. But yes, obviously, a lot of the audience will be like, "Oh boy, getting a little antsy here." You know? I do have another negative I want to mention. It's a very tiny one, but I do want to ask you, Chris, because you said earlier that the movie starts with Jason, like, you know, pulling this prank and like getting into the accident and everything.
Yeah.
Let's actually acknowledge what it starts with is a joke about jerking off a bull.
That is my first note. This movie starts with somebody who jerked off a cow.
Now, You and I have been spending a lot of time talking about how we're
my
like,
God.
I didn't go to a Power Rangers movie expecting, all this like actual teen
Bestiality?
drama, but I'm glad it's there. Now, I also didn't expect a bestiality joke. I don't know if I'm glad it's there. Why? You could lose that.
I love. Okay, hold on.
Oh boy, where's this going?
No, I guess what I'm going to say is that's your Transformers humor coming through.
I know.
That's Bumblebee pissing on the agents. That's the fucking testicle joke. That's just this time in the late aughts where they made these types of just bad jokes in huge blockbuster movies.
I think it sticks out like a sore thumb in this one because it happens so fast, right? It's
the
literally
first
one of
thing.
the first things. And then there's nothing else like it, right?
No.
So it's like, if it was like, oh, we made a Power Rangers movie, but it's also like we're kind of doing like an American Pie thing with it, that'd be an interesting, thing. But when they're like, hey, there's just one moment where they make a joke about jerking off a bull, you're like, oh, well, that's strange,
Did you did you like that it was obviously set in Vancouver, just like Monster Trucks was?
Boy, yeah.
I was expecting Creech to be flying through the streets.
Wait, you don't think that was actually Angel Grove, California? You know what I do like too, and again, this lends to like what this movie's doing and how it's different is that, obviously Angel Grove in the show was just kind of depicted, well, you didn't see very much of it, but it was depicted as like the ultimate like, California surf like paradise, right? Just like, oh, whoa, it's all like crazy California high school kids and like everything's super colorful. And I kind of love that the Angel Grove here feels very much like a realistic town that's, I'm not saying it's like a bad town, but it feels like a town that's maybe like, it's some businesses are shuttered and closed, it's like, it's a real place. I do like that.
Well, speaking of real places, again, real stunts, real things happening. Like even when they jumped the gorge, that was stunt people on wires. Like, there was not many CGI doubles. It was nice to see some real stuff,
Yeah. Real Krispy Kreme product placement.
Egregious.
People
Egregious.
like listening to this episode who haven't seen the movie and are wondering why I keep saying Krispy Kreme. Believe me, we have not even said it close to as much as they do in the movie. But again, I've seen people like make fun of this, and it's like, are you really going to make fun of that? Because this is the ultimate movie where obviously they got thrown a bunch of money from Krispy Kreme. It was like a huge product placement for them, and they were like, you know what? Let's just lean into it.
Yeah.
And I think it's very funny when like you have to like have a scene where like your villain is like threatening death to this team and saying, where is the Zeo crystal I'm looking for? And then they're like, oh, it's at the Krispy Kreme. And she repeats like, Krispy Kreme. And it's like, oh my God. It's like it's so blatant that it becomes funny.
Even just like walking down the street as like destruction's happening and she's like, where's the Krispy Kreme?
Yes. And then there's actually like, they cut to like the Power Rangers in their Zords, like fighting like her like monsters. And like, we're watching them communicate with each other. And like Kimberly's like, she hasn't made it to the Krispy Kreme yet. You got to keep her away from the Krispy Kreme. It's like, oh my God, you would like a drinking game on Krispy Kreme on this, you would die for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking
of the Pink Ranger and Kimberly, Naomi Scott, she has gone on to have a fairly successful career. Like she's not like a name or anything, but she went from here to the Charlie's Angels movie, which didn't do well. But she was in the Aladdin movie as Jasmine. Did well, but I don't know what's going to happen with that. And then she's most recently in Smile 2, getting a lot of acclaim. I really like Naomi Scott. I like not only because she's just stunning, but I think she's just very, very talented. She's got a physicality to her. She has a great American accent that she does. She's very good. She's very much a movie star. She's not.
Well, no, and she won't be because of what the industry is now. But
exactly, but she's one of those actresses that you watch. Of all the years we've been talking about movie stars, like the only one left is Tom Cruise. She's an actress that you watch, and I think we even talked about that in Charlie's Angels when there's 3 on screen. Your eyes kind of jet over to Naomi Scott. I think she's just great. I really like her.
Well, I mean, not surprising because she is a clone of Sarah Michelle Gellar, right? Like,
I could see that.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about that, and like honestly, it's okay. So next time you watch this movie, Chris, I don't know how long it'll be until you watch it again.
Okay.
But next time or just after we record, right? Do me a favor and try this, right? Go put on some scenes. And close your eyes. She has Sarah Michelle Gellar's voice. Like I was watching the movie and I'm like, why does she sound familiar? And I started doing that, like not looking at the screen. I'm like, oh my God, she sounds just like Buffy. And then I swear to God, I literally, like after the movie was done, I Googled, does Naomi Scott sound like Sarah Michelle Gellar? Because I wanted to see if anyone else said that. And what I found was everyone else was like, oh my God, she looks so much like Sarah Michelle Gellar. And then I saw people doing like side-by-side comparisons. And I was like, oh yeah, she kind of does. And maybe that's even feeding into why I'm hearing the voice, right? So it's like they're very, very similar. They have similar energies too. But yeah, I remember the closest consideration there was to like where after this movie came out and bombed, the one time I saw people say like maybe the sequel will happen was when Aladdin was happening, because I'm really like, oh my God, if Aladdin blows up huge, like she might become such a big star that it would be worth it for them to like do a sequel to this, and we know she wants to, right? So she would still be down. Unfortunately, it never happened. But yeah, as you said, she's enjoying a moment again this year. I just watched Smile 2. Wasn't for me. That's just not a franchise I'm into. But I agree, she's awesome in it. Like I'm not going to deny that she was giving her all and like doing. And she's what made that movie. I think she plays a big part in why people like really like that movie. Even
Definitely,
though it's just not my vibe. But
no, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. Like I'm excited to see where she goes next. And I wish she would get to play this part again. But no, she rules. And I do think. It's funny because we keep saying like who's the MVP of this, and like I said, I think Billy's like the most fun character. I think Zach is maybe like for me like the most like surprising character. She maybe gives like the best like pure performance. I don't know. She's who like I watched this with Liz, my wife, and Liz really liked her a lot. So yeah, I don't know. And even like go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say they all have their little moments, and like I really buy Dacre Montgomery. We haven't even said his name yet. He plays Jason, the Red Ranger, and like I just really buy him as the leader. You know, Zordon when he says
he went on to like
Stranger
Stranger Things, right? I was done with the show by that point. But
correct, yeah, he was in season 3, the hot brother that all the moms want. He's really good in that movie in that season, but all the times that Zordon says like Jason, this is your team. And then the way Dacre talks to a green screen, you buy it. You really do. You buy his struggle as the leader and making sure that everybody's safe. And I think he just does an excellent job. You know, we said Naomi Scott, you know, R.J. Kyler as Billy. Ludi Lin is the actor who plays Zach, the Black Ranger, does an expert performance, especially with his mom. And then Becky G as Trini, maybe the most like we said before, the most underserved character of the bunch. Yeah. But she's still really good, and I like seeing her.
And what's surprising is I looked her up after this, and like she has really not done much more acting. Like I know she's
like a pop star. She's like a pop star. Right?
She's a huge pop star, yeah. But I just thought like it's just weird that she was even in this, you know, because you look at her like filmography and you get the sense like I don't think this is something she's really that interested in pursuing. So I don't know if she was just like maybe this is like actually a property she really like dug or something. But yeah, it's kind of like just this. And then she hasn't kept that part of her career going necessarily. But no, she's good too. Yeah. Oh, we didn't even mention that Bill Hader is the voice of Alpha 5, but he is giving a very Bill Hader performance. So
yeah. I said before that Cranston as Zordon has a sense of gravitas to him. What I meant when I said his threatening, I didn't mean to say it like that. He has an edge to him, and I think because there's like this little bit in the plot that makes it seem like he's maybe manipulating the Rangers to morph so he can be resurrected. And I think that really works. The plot works with his characterization, and I buy into that, and then I buy where the movie goes. Well, yeah, you'll have to watch the movie.
Yeah,
but
no, it's a character. It's a character journey for Zordon as well, right? Again, not something you expect, but you know, they put some care into this. You know. We should also mention there is a brief cameo from Amy Jo Johnson and Jason David Frank, and I especially want to bring that up because. Look, we did tragically lose Jason David Frank, and I did like the guy, but I do think it's funny that in his cameo, the cameo is him and Amy Jo Johnson, along with other onlookers in Angel Grove after the big battle. They all pull out their phones and are taking pictures of the Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And then later at the premiere of this movie, Jason David Frank was ejected from the theater because he literally took out his phone and tried to record his cameo on the screen. I don't know if you knew that. But.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh my God. Okay. we're winding down. We just really want to talk about the sequel talks and a certain sequel that maybe kind of was made. Trev has history on that. But first and foremost, this movie, supposedly the Lionsgate CEO said that they have like 5 or 6 films they want to make from this. Haim Saban said that they have a 6-film storyline ready to go. Obviously that didn't happen. Didn't even come close to that. But they also... there was talks, I guess, recently that they were going to be rebooting it again. That had like a time travel aspect, was gonna be focused in the 1990s, but then that all fell apart as well as soon as I think Hasbro got a hold of the rights, and then all the things with Netflix. It's not going to happen. So I don't really know when the Power Rangers will see the light of day again theatrically. I don't suspect anytime soon. Breaking news, listeners. This recording was done on December 23rd, 2024, with no knowledge of any Power Rangers property in the mix, reboots, remakes of that nature. But December 25th, 2024, it was rumored from at Daniel RPK, a scooper out there on the interwebs, that a new Power Rangers film is in early development. Not much is known yet about the reboot or remake, but it could be animated series, it could be a movie. There's a stated $100 million being allocated to the reboot of this property of the Power Rangers, but it sounds like a full buyout from Skydance and Paramount Pictures from Hasbro. With Paramount becoming the main owner of the property. So we could see a movie or TV show coming soon to Paramount Plus or Prime Video, as some of these theatrical releases are coming straight to streaming. So stay tuned, but that is what we know at this time. Again, we're coming to you almost live with this news. Not much else is known. It is still rumor and could be fabrication. But stay tuned with at F2F Pod on all the socials. We will keep you posted on further developments as they come here. So anyways, we'll get back to your normally scheduled programming right now. And thank you very much. However, Trev has information that I am not privy to.
So there is, if you do enjoy this movie as much as Chris and I do, and you're like just jonesing for at least something else with this version of the characters, there was a graphic novel sequel that Boom Studios made. It was like it came out like right when right in the aftermath of the movie, and I know this because I have the Steelbook Blu-ray of this, and it was actually the version I bought was actually packaged with a small version of this graphic novel, and it is called Power Rangers Aftershock. And it's written by Ryan Parrott with art by Lucas Wernick and Joanna Lafuente. And it picks up like right after the movie. And what I really dig about it, I'm not going to say it's like the best like graphic novel you'll ever read or anything, but what I like about it is that it kind of continues this idea of really exploring like what the Power Rangers would be like in a real world, which we've been giving the movie credit for. One of the funniest things I always think watching the show, as I said, you sit down and you watch like 5 episodes of the show in a row, right? And every single episode ends with a giant battle with their Megazord, or their Zords and their Megazord versus a giant monster, right? In the middle of Angel Grove. And then you're always just like, oh my God, how destroyed is this city? Right? Because we see them like just throwing like the monsters through buildings and like explosions. And it's like, oh my God, millions are dying like every week on the show. And it's never acknowledged, right? This graphic novel starts showing the aftermath of the battle at the end of this movie. And we see that Angel Grove is actually like recovering from that battle. And in fact, the government has flown in and they've set up like refugee camps for people. They're helping to rebuild, but there's also people that are now living in tents because like their homes have been destroyed so we actually see like the aftermath of this. And the dramatic thrust of the graphic novel is that when Rita died, there's still a bunch of putties running around. So the Power Rangers are playing like kind of cleanup on that. They're still trying to take care of the rest of the rest of the putties. And even though the movie ends, because it has to, because it's a movie, right? It ends with them kind of overcoming all their problems and becoming a well-oiled team. This graphic novel explores the fact that, well, actually, they've only still been Power Rangers for a day. So they're still learning to work together. And they're still like not, their teamwork hasn't completely gelled yet. So they're still having some problems. Some of them are still kind of bristling against the fact that Jason was just anointed leader and that they never had a call on that. So he still has to kind of like prove himself. So it's more character exploration as they're fighting these putties. And then there's these these two characters. It's like a brother and a sister that end up kind of getting merged with like the putties and take on like they kind of become like human monster hybrids, and they're like the villains of the piece. So it's kind of exploring how like what Rita's left behind could still mutate humans and create maybe like new monsters to fight. The reason I wanted to bring this up, because why I think it's interesting, is that, like I said, so there is a sequel in this continuity, but what's really interesting is I wonder how much they were even communicating like with the movie people and saying like, hey, maybe this really was like something to be like setting up the next film. Because another thing happens is like this like bizarre, this like woman shows up who like works for the government, and she seems like this antagonist, and she's like talking to the sheriff in the town about who are these like Power Rangers, who is this new superhero team in your town, what do you know about them? And you really feel like she's going to be like maybe a villain. And at the end she like confronts them, and we find out she actually works for this like government organization. It's been a while since I've read it, but I think she says it's like they're called Apex or something.
Okay.
And she basically says like, we're the organization that's in charge of like kind of keeping, when supernatural crazy things happen in the world, we kind of pay attention.
Shield.
It's kind of like that, right? She's like, we pay attention to this, and she's like, you know what? So far, everything you've done has been good. You're clearly on the side of good. So we'll keep an eye on you. But if you get out of line, we'll step in. But for now, like we'll keep an eye on you and like keep doing what you're doing, but don't get out of line. And it's like, wow, that seems like a very bizarre thing to introduce in this graphic novel, unless it was going somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like, why set that up if it doesn't mean anything? So it's surprising to me that, I don't know, maybe the graphic novel just didn't sell that well or whatever, but it is surprising to me that, if nothing else, they didn't keep this continuity going in the comic books, because to this day, Boom Studios still produces multiple Power Rangers comic books. Like I said, Amy Jo Johnson was just writing a Pink Ranger book, and this actually is telling to what we were saying about how like the comic books are all Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like even in the comic book world, they just can't move beyond those characters, right? But it's just strange that you would think that there was a period where I know they were doing Star Trek comic books that were both the Kelvinverse comic books and the regular verse comic books, right? So why not have like a Power Rangers movie universe comic book that's still going today? I wish there was, honestly, just so I could feel like this universe is still alive. But at least we have the one sequel.
It's like a bizarre lack of confidence, right? And I think like even when you go to look for things about this movie, it does feel like the one that is forgotten, which is so sad, because it is like so damn good. Like the first movie, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie from '95, has at least been memeified, and this movie didn't even get the memes. It's hard to find the GIFs for this one, and that's got to be what it is. Also, it probably has something to do with Saban selling a lot of their rights to Hasbro, and just knowing that this version of the Power Rangers just did not sell. And if you're a toy company, well, gotta focus on the hits.
Maybe the artists are like, those suits are harder to draw than the regular ones.
That too.
There is a sequel tease at the end of this. We should point out there is like a little mid-credit scene which teases the idea of Tommy Oliver coming in. And I don't know if you saw this in your research, Chris, but multiple cast members spoke out in favor of Gigi Hadid playing Tommy, to do like a gender swap Tommy, because she was a huge fan of the franchise, and I think she'd even tried out for the role of Kimberly in this and didn't get it. But I kind of like that idea, because like they said, like, we only hear Tommy's name at the end, and I think Dacre Montgomery did an interview where he's like, well, Tommy doesn't have to be a boy's name,
Right.
So I kind of dig that idea, and I know you were just talking earlier, like how sometimes that could maybe be seen as the kind of like, oh, we're just trying to create a headline gender swapping. But the reason I think it's actually a good call is because Jason David Frank is so like kind of connected to the franchise, right? And so iconic that like, since he is like the biggest character and the one people most associate, it might be a good idea to do a complete kind of like, reinterpretation to Tommy in a sequel. Not that we have to worry about it, but
I thought you were going to say that the rumor was just to get Jason David Frank back and as if he had failed school multiple times. And yeah, he's just perpetually in detention.
Wouldn't be that much different than Lucas Till in Monster Trucks, I'll tell you that.
Okay, all right, we're wrapping up. 2 questions I got for you. Well, I know the answer to, I think, both. But does the Power Rangers from 2017 deserve a sequel? And it's been a while since we've asked this question, but does it pass the dread test?
Does it deserve a sequel? Yes, right? Like, and when we should say, whenever we're answering this, we're answering it from our perspective, right? Do I want to see sequels to this? Yes, I think I do think they were getting a little ahead of themselves, and they said this was like a 6 or 7 film, arc that they had planned. They were saying that before the movie came out, and I even remember at the time being like, "Guys, what are you doing?" But I think this could have been a good trilogy for sure. I just, like I said, I wanted to see this cast together again.
Same.
And I have the feeling that a sequel would have given us more action, which is what this movie needed. So yes, I do think this deserves a sequel. And for me, does it pass the Dread test? I mean, look, this is not as good as Dread. This is not as good as The Fifth Element. It's not. But I'll give it the slightest pass of the Dread test, in that I think for what it's aiming for, I think it's much better than it could have been. And I think it's I think it's a really unique take on like the Power Rangers IP, and I think it's a really good superhero like teen origin story. So yeah, I quite like this, and I think if people have just been avoiding it because of the reputation, give it a shot, give it a fair shot.
Yeah, I say yes to both. This does what a franchise starter should do. It does, and especially something based on a pre-existing property. It elevates it. It does something different. It does play the hits at some point, so you do get your hits. So you can't say that they didn't get in suits. You can't say that they didn't get to be in a Megazord. They do.
Yeah. You get all the catchphrases. You get all the you eventually get the iconography. So yeah.
Yeah. So like it's you get a little bit of the theme song, which I will say should have played more, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
But even the fact that this movie plays the theme song at all, again, shows you that they weren't taking them entirely seriously.
Totally.
Like people accuse it of being. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I agree that this movie's awesome. It continues to be awesome. Check it out. Buy the Blu-ray. Why not? It looks great. It's one of the very few Blu-rays, especially nowadays, that has an animated menu, which is great. Which shows that there's some people that want creativity in their physical media still. But this is very good. I loved it. I still love it. So that'll do it for Power Rangers. That'll do it for 2024. Man.
Yeah, I know.
Real quick, I'll tell you the schedule for January. We're gonna be, Trev, we love our themes. I know I have to tell you every single time I explain a theme, but we love our themes, and we're going into January. But instead, we've renamed it the Mutant Gene-uary. Get it?
Yeah, I got it.
With the success of Deadpool and Wolverine, and the constant hints of mutants coming into the MCU, and seemingly maybe next year going into 2026, we might see it a little bit more. Who knows what the fuck they're doing anymore? But January 14th, we're going to be looking at The New Mutants from 2020. And then January 28th, we're going to be looking at Mutant Chronicles from 2008. I believe that's a YA adaptation, our favorite.
It's not. It's something else.
Okay, it's something else. I don't want to know the answer to that question.
Yep,
Never mind.
No, don't worry, we'll get there.
Okay. So that'll be the Mutant Gene-uary going into 2025. If you don't mind, I just want to say something from the heart.
Sure.
I know I don't usually. But 2024 has come to an end, and this is actually coming out on New Year's Eve. So hopefully you're listening. Maybe you can listen to it after being hungover or something, after partying. But 2024 was a pretty big year for both me and Trev. Trev got married, I got engaged, and just the year was amazing. And I've always and a lot of things happened in my professional life as well. But just this was the first movie of F2F that my dog was not around for. So I just want to say, if you do have pets, hold them closer, hug them a little harder, and, give them a treat for me, please. Anyway, not to leave on a downer.
No, that's okay, man. And hey, Chris's dog R2 was like one of the cutest dogs. Like, I loved the pictures of him, and I could that was a dog that was very, very loved and had a great life with you. So, take comfort in that. Yeah.
So onward and upward. We're gonna watch some bad movies, and I always love talking to you during this, and you're one of my best friends. So, anyway, listeners, follow along at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2FPod. That's on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating will be awesome. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And let's go to the Mutant Genuary.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I'm going to go morph.
All right, then. It's Morphin Time! Dragon Sword! Mastodon!
Pterodactyl!
Triceratops!
Saber-tooth tiger!
Tyrannosaurus! Yeah! We're ready to morph into action! 6 working together to fight evil!
And stop Rita and all her menacing monsters!
From destroying our planet Earth!
And we're